Hello, everybody. It's a big pleasure to be here again with you all. Today is we have the privilege and big honor to have with us Ken Opengart. I had the opportunity to meet him a few months ago in a animal welfare summit. And I can say that Ken is a global mindset. His experience in animal welfare and so much other fields in the industry is something that really capture our attention, and we're very excited to have him today. And in a poultry school, and we have the vision, first of all, to share knowledge, information, and to create connectivity. Ken is going to be talking to us today about animal welfare indicators and how to drive a continuous improvement. And thank you, Ken, for your time and your willingness to be here with us. So, like always, this webinar will be recorded and we will share with everybody in maybe 1 or 2 weeks. And if at the end somebody has some questions, Ken will be open to answer them. So, Ken, thank you very much. You can go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Rodolfo. I do appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all this afternoon and really focus on not only key welfare indicators, but talking about animal welfare frameworks and most importantly, an actionable animal welfare framework, how it relates to key welfare indicators and how the two work together to drive continuous improvement in welfare outcomes. So let's see if I can get my slides to advance here. There we go. So what I broke the talk up into sort of three areas. The first is the introduction to the 5 domains, which again is that actionable animal welfare framework that I wanted to talk about and do a little contrast with the 5 freedoms, which is an animal welfare framework that's been around for many, many years that many of you have worked for organizations that align with the 5 freedoms. And, as all sciences do, we evolve in knowledge. And so I think the animal welfare science is evolving, and we're not to take any importance away from the 5 freedoms, but we're beginning to migrate to the 5 domains. So we'll describe that transition. Then I want to spend a little bit more time talking about key welfare indicators, what they are, how we use them, and then a specific example of a case that I worked when I was working in production on dead-on arrivals. This is a very important key welfare indicator in the poultry industry. So again, to start off, the importance of an actionable animal welfare framework. And again, the 5 freedoms have been around for decades. And as I mentioned, a lot of organizations call out the 5 freedoms in their animal welfare statements, and they acknowledge the importance of the 5 freedoms, and they certainly have been important in developing animal welfare programs and animal welfare culture. And you see when you look at the 5 domains that they call out very specific things and freedom from these things, like freedom from discomfort and fear and distress and hunger and thirst, among the others. And I think these are very important things as we drive to improve animal welfare, to recognize that we want our animals free of these things. But let me just maybe put things in perspective. And I'm going to try to make this interactive. So if you guys on the line would either type in that web address or use your phone with the QR code, and you could answer for me, which of the following have you experienced in the last 48 hours? And these 5 choices are, there you go. These 5 choices are the 5 domains, right? So if you can input your information, and we can see how many of you have experienced either hunger or thirst or discomfort or fear or distress, pain, injury, or disease, or if you've been able to express normal behavior. And you can pick more than one. I should have told you that. You can pick up to 5. And so as you're entering the data, you can see that at least one person has experienced at least one of these, which is the point, right? Even when we're in charge of our own welfare, we don't do a very good job of satisfying the 5 freedoms. And so this is a little bit problematic when we're charged with ensuring that the 5 freedoms are met for the animals entrusted to our care, and we have trouble doing it for ourselves. So I just wanted to provide you with that perspective, and now share with you that, we know now that the authors of the 5 freedoms meant it to be aspirational. In other words, they recognized that these freedoms were difficult or impossible to achieve, but these were really meant to provide guidance for appropriate action. So we should always be working to achieve freedom from these things. But at the same time, we recognize that it's difficult to measure what freedom from something is or absence of something is. It's just really impossible to measure. How do we know for sure that animals don't experience hunger or thirst when we know that physiologically they have to experience hunger and thirst to want to eat and drink? So it's really kind of difficult to navigate these. And then these 5 freedoms also focus on negative experiences and outcomes, and really don't talk about promoting positive outcomes, which is a very important aspect of welfare. And so what we know is that just because if we were to achieve freedom from negative outcomes, that doesn't necessarily guarantee that we're delivering positive outcomes. So that's why I think, as I mentioned, welfare science, as it develops this new framework that was developed by researchers at Massey University in New Zealand, came up with the 5 domains. And so in the next few minutes, I want to explain to you a very basic understanding of the 5 domains. And the key thing that I want you to remember is that it's very practical, it's pretty easy to understand, and it's actionable. Okay, so those are important aspects of the 5 domains. So within the 5 domains, we have 3 survival-related domains: the nutrition, environment, and health. And within these 3 survival-related domains, we can either have positive or negative welfare outcomes. So in the case of environment, at the top, if an animal experiences thermal extremes, or is an environment with poor light, poor air quality, or poor bedding, that animal will have negative welfare outcomes. On the other hand, if the animal is maintained in its thermal neutral zone and has thermal comfort and has proper light, air quality, and bedding, you're going to promote positive outcomes. So for each of these 3 survival-related factors, we can have positive or negative outcomes, right? And then we have a 4th situation-related factor as opposed to a survival-related factor, and this is behavior. And behavior can be influenced by interactions between animals within a group, the interaction with the humans that animal interfaces with, and the interaction of the animal with its environment overall. And again, you can have negative outcomes or positive outcomes. Okay, so when we put all of these physical domains together, we have to also understand that there's a relatedness to each of those. So in other words, if you have poor nutritional outcomes, that's going to influence poor health outcomes, potentially poor behavioral outcomes. So if we're impacting one domain, we're no doubt impacting as well. Now, I've talked about 4 domains. This is the 5 domains. So the 5th domain is perhaps the most important because it brings all of the positive and negative outcomes that the animals are experiencing in nutrition, health, behavior, and environment into that mental state, the 5th domain. So how the animal interacts and responds to its environment is the mental state, the welfare state of the animal. Okay, so that's the 5th domain. It's also important to understand, and I think you probably have a feeling, that this mental state is very dynamic because each of these domains has positive and negative outcomes associated with it. And really the total of all of these impacts create whether the welfare state of the animal is unfavorable or favorable. And it may be favorable in one of the domains and unfavorable in others. But all of these interactions make this assessment of welfare state very dynamic and changing minute to minute. And so this schematic really helps maybe illustrate what an animal experiences over time and how the different things can drive opportunities for improvement or positive conditions. And as we're assessing welfare of animals, what we really need to be doing is looking for these opportunities for improvement and driving that animal's mental state, that overall mental state, from any unfavorable aspect to favorable. And so with that explanation, I think you can understand again that this is it's practical, it's actionable because it's looking for opportunities for improvement, it's dynamic, and these domains are again interrelated. They all influence the other. They all impact that mental state, the welfare state of the animal. So hopefully with that quick introduction to the 5 domains, you can see how important it is to build your welfare program and your approach to welfare assessment around the 5 domains as opposed to the 5 freedoms, which I feel are less actionable. So now let's transition and talk about integrating key welfare indicators to drive continuous improvement in animal welfare outcomes. And hopefully in the back of your mind, you're processing the 5 domains information and you're thinking about different welfare indicators and opportunities with welfare indicators. And if I have this situation and make that correct that situation that's driving negative outcomes for the animal, I can move that welfare dynamic continuum farther to the right, to the favorable. So let's again talk about key welfare indicators, what they are and why they're important. And welfare indicators are just objective observations that can be measured, monitored, and managed to assess and or improve animal welfare outcomes. Pretty straightforward. All of us in production are used to looking at metrics. We know what's good, what's not good, and key welfare indicators are just specific for welfare, things that we measure in welfare. And why are they important? Well, they keep the focus on the animal and less on resource-based requirements. There's a lot of pressure, as an example, to change stocking densities in poultry or use specific breeds with different characteristics. But those don't necessarily change the welfare state of the animal. In fact, we know that management of the animal and observing the outcomes of what you're doing in the animal is the most important way to measure whether we're improving welfare or not. Not a breed, not a stocking density. In fact, you can have bad welfare with slow growing breeds and very low stocking densities if management isn't good, but you wouldn't know it unless you were looking at the outcomes. KWIs also provide a common system and language for consistent monitoring and managing of animal welfare. So if I'm talking to a group in Thailand or Latin America or the US, and I'm talking about foot pad quality, foot pad lesions, we should have the same general understanding of what that is, what the causative factors are, how to measure it, and how to improve it. And this KWIs provides that common language. KWIs are critical tools that we can use to develop action plans. And I talked about this with the 5 domains. You're looking for those opportunities, you're developing action plans to address those opportunities, and through that action, you're driving continuous improvement. And you're measuring that improvement with these key welfare indicators. And the communication about our progress is so important. And we really haven't done a good job in past history about communicating our progress and our positive impact on the welfare of the animals entrusted to our care. So this provides us the way to do that. So what are some of the characteristics of KWIs? Well, certainly they should be grounded in science or empirical evidence and outcome based. Again, we want these to be measured at the animal level and not to be resource based, which tend to be prescriptive things that we apply to a production system. They should be measurable, meaningful, practical to apply, because we all know if they're not practical to apply, they're not going to be measured. They should be repeatable, reliable, and actionable. So you've seen this schematic about the welfare state of the animal and the continuum. And as we assess welfare, we can use these KWIs to identify the opportunities and drive that continuum more to the right, to the favorable side. And we can feel comfortable that if we're improving KWIs, we are improving the animal welfare outcomes. And if we're doing that, we're improving welfare in the animal. So now I want to kind of provide you with an example to pull the 5 domains and key welfare indicators together, and sort of a practical test for you. So you're conducting an audit of a 3-day-old broiler flock, and you notice the chicks are huddling under their heat source and crowded in their feed pans. They're lying very closely together, huddled together, not moving much. And when you examine the chicks themselves, you notice that they're dehydrated, that their legs are showing you signs of dehydration, and their crops are empty, so they haven't eaten food. And when you necropsy some of the chicks, you don't see any clinical signs of disease, so that you deduce the chicks have been chilled, and that's why they're acting the way they are. Okay. So again, the interactive portion, if you could use the QR code. And I can't tell on my screen, it doesn't look like you see all the choices, but when you bring up that QR code, you should see all of the choices, all of the 5 domains to choose from as far as which might be affected in this scenario. So health, environment, nutrition, behavior, or all of the above. You could use the QR code and put your inputs in, please. All right, I'm not seeing any responses. Oops. Oh, there we go. And again, you can choose more than one. You can choose all right. All right. Well, so in this example, actually, all of the above, all of the above are impacted. The environment obviously is not conducive to chicks performing their normal behaviors that chicks do, which is eating and drinking and exploring their environment. They're not getting adequate food and water. Their behavior isn't normal, and that's going to negatively impact their health. So in this case, all 4 of those behaviors, or sorry, of those domains are negatively impacted, right? And then if we ask the question, how might the behavior of these chicks be different than healthy chicks? Again, we understand, if you could use the QR code and answer what you would expect these chicks to be doing versus healthy chicks. So are these chicks not exploring their environment? Are they not eating or drinking? Are they tightly packed together, or all of the above? And these are sort of behavioral observations that we're making. So they're key welfare indicators, but they're behavioral key welfare indicators. Okay, they're certainly not eating and drinking. And they are tightly packed together, which normal chicks shouldn't be this tightly packed together, and they're not exploring their environment. Most normal chicks are up, looking around their environment, pecking, playing around with each other. So in this case, all of the above. All right. Next question. Which key welfare indicators are likely to be impacted in this example? So these are more key welfare indicators that if you were to measure and monitor in this environment, again, you can pick as many as you want here. We've got some good responses coming in now. So in this flock, yep. So feed consumption would be down and water consumption would be down because the chicks are not up eating and drinking like they should be. That's going to certainly cause an increase in early mortality and the development of more culls than you would typically see. Chick movement and vocalization too, actually, with birds that are not eating and drinking, they can be quite loud if they're unhappy. And so we've got really all of these would be key welfare indicators that are impacted in this example. And so again, when we look at the characteristics of the key welfare indicators, and then the key welfare indicators that we considered in this example that we just asked about, we can really begin to assign a domain associated with the key welfare indicators. And this is, again, just pulling the animal welfare framework of the 5 domains together with key indicators to show that, you know, if we have opportunities with feed consumption and water consumption, it does negatively impact the nutrition domain. And there are things that we can do, right, to change that and improve that. That's the opportunity. So we talked a lot about the 4 domains, but that 5th domain, the mental state in this case, if you can use that QR code and let me know whether you think the mental state of these chicks in this example is favorably, unfavorably impacted, or has no impact. All right, 100% unfavorable. Yeah, absolutely. These chicks are not getting off to a good start. Their welfare state is compromised because of the lack of heat in the environment. So what, you know, here comes the action, the teaching moment for the farmer. If you happen to be on this farm, you can begin to talk to them about what changes they can make to improve not only the key welfare indicators, but also the mental state, the 5 domains. And so what actions might the farmer take to improve the situation? Add more heat to the environment, make changes to the ventilation, turn the heat off, or A and B. So in actuality, both A and B are correct. They can add more heat to the environment. They can make changes to the ventilation to get more even airflow and more heat distribution throughout the house. And both of those will improve the environment for that chick. They certainly don't want to turn the heat completely off because that'll be doing the wrong thing. Okay, so the farmer does this, makes this adjustment, and over a period of time, you see the pictures change. The chicks have spread out throughout the house, which is much more what you want to see. And by doing this, which of the 4 physical domains would be impacted by the management changes? Health, environment, nutrition, behavior, or all of the above? All of the above. You guys are getting the hang of it. Yeah, so by making that change in management, we've moved that unfavorable, remember that continuum, dynamic continuum of welfare, we've moved that continuum from the right unfavorable over to the left unfavorable to the right favorable by improving the heat that these birds have access to. And by doing this, we should have changed the mental state of the animal, right? Because all 4 of those physical domains, mental percent, yes, favorably, we've changed that mental state. Okay, so that was just a quick example to illustrate to you the connection between the 5 domains and key welfare indicators, and how it's really, again, a practical framework. KWIs are very practical in nature. You can see how you can use that to drive that continuous improvement in welfare that we're looking for. And so when we consider the 5 domains and key welfare indicators, we like the domains because they're an actionable, systematic, structured, comprehensive approach to welfare. And again, I'll just say one more time, actionable. They address the dynamic continuum of animal welfare. I think you have a good understanding of that now. And because of that, they allow us to assess and address animal welfare compromise and promote animal welfare enhancement, which is very key. The framework also reinforces the importance of the affective state or the mental state of the animal, and which is a good reminder, because I think sometimes we lose sight of the fact that the animals we work with are totally impacted by the environments we create for them. And then it moves from providing a life worth living, which implies minimal suffering, to providing a good life, which is promoting positive experiences. And we talked about the importance of that. And then finally, it aligns with the use of key welfare indicators and animal-based outcomes to demonstrate continuous improvement. So before we transition away from the key welfare indicators in general, I just wanted to bring attention to the key welfare indicator guides that are published by the International Poultry Welfare Alliance. They're available in English, Spanish, Thai, and Portuguese. They're available on the website, which is listed here. They're free. They're a great resource. They define what the KWIs are. They talk about why each one is important, how to measure them, and some information on how to improve them if there's some opportunity. So great resource guides for you all. And now I just want to transition and talk about a specific KWI, which is a dead on arrival problem in an integrated broiler operation in the US. So this is an operation that I worked in several years ago. And I thought it was maybe a good way to just show how key welfare indicator information can be used in a production setting, in an operational setting, and where I think it's important not only to bring the welfare aspects, but also the economic and performance aspects of KWIs, because when you're talking to operations folks about welfare, they don't always get the message unless you talk in a language that they're familiar with. And oftentimes that's the economics of the problem as well as the welfare of the program, or a problem or the sustainability considerations of a problem. Part of the illustration here is just to show you how I approach the problem, and maybe to be helpful as you approach problems in your own operations. But let's first define a dead on arrival. So dead on arrival are birds that die between the time birds are caught on the farm and they're shackled at the plant. So very specific time frame during the production cycle, really a relatively short time in the entire bird's life, but a pretty traumatic time, given that for the bird's life, once they're delivered from the hatchery, they live a pretty stress-free life on the broiler farm until the last 18 hours, 12 hours or so, when they go through a series of steps to get them through the plant. DOAs can be impacted by a number of different factors, including weather, bird health, how they're handled and transported, and how they're held at the plant once they arrive. And in the case of DOAs, it's a responsibility that usually falls on live operations and to some degree plant operations. But when you have a DOA problem, I find that nobody necessarily wants to take primary responsibility, and there's a lot of finger pointing. So when you're working on DOA problems, it's important to get both groups involved. And when you're setting up goals, they should be shared goals between live operations and plant operations. On the right here is just, I mentioned those IPWA guides. This is just one page from the DOA section of the broiler IPWA guide. Again, has great information there as far as background goes. And I'm going to share with you some welfare considerations, economic considerations, and sustainability considerations relative to DOAs before I talk about the specific case. So as I mentioned, the process of delivering market-age birds to the plant is a continuum from house preparation for catch all the way through shackling of the birds and everything in between. And I mentioned already that the events during these last few hours of the bird's life can be very stressful, resulting in negative welfare outcomes if the process isn't closely monitored and managed. And the DOA is, in a broiler operation, is one of the most visible KWIs because it does represent a well-defined metric that's easy to calculate and demonstrate economic consequences. It's easy to see the welfare consequences. And so it can get a lot of attention when the numbers are high. But saying that, it's also difficult to determine specific places in the process where birds succumb, and it can be subjective until an initial assessment is done. And that's where some of the finger pointing I mentioned comes in. And I've also found that once an issue has been corrected, the measurement of this key welfare indicator, we measure it all the time anyway, but the focus on this measurement and management should continue because it can go the wrong direction very quickly. And so attention to detail is very important here. So let's go beyond the welfare considerations and talk about the economic considerations. You know, at the point you're bringing a live bird to the plant or a dead bird to the plant, your total investment at that point includes the cost of producing that chick or poult, if you're in the turkey world, all the feed that's manufactured and delivered to feed that bird, the pay that is paid to the grower to raise the bird, and then the cost to catch and transport the bird to the plant. So you've got all the cost in that bird that's being delivered. And if it dies in the process, the most that you're going to get returned on that investment you've made is what the rendered bird's weight is, the value of that weight, which is a fraction of the true value of that broiler. So if we put numbers to it, if we consider in a 6.5 pound bird complex, or a complex that targets 6.5 pound birds, we've got about a 50-cent live cost, let's just say. So that's for every bird that we've raised, that's $3.25 in live cost. And so if a complex is averaging just 0.25% DOA is 0.25%, that cost for that percentage of DOAs is about $500,000. And for every 0.01% change, so if you went from a 0.25 DOA rate to a 0.26, that would be an additional $20,000 a year. That's in just lost investment, that $325 per bird. But then you have to consider the lost opportunity. So the revenue that you're not now going to be able to generate from that bird and selling the meat and byproducts. And for every 0.01% change, that's another $33,000 in lost opportunity. Okay. So if we consider that in the US, the average broiler company runs about 0.25% DOAs, and the top companies run around a 0.1% DOAs. So that 0.15 difference represents, and again, that's 0.15 times that $20,000 in lost investment and the $33,000 per 0.01% in lost opportunity. That total opportunity to get from average to top company is $800,000 a year. And so there's, you know, there should be economic incentive to improve this. Of course, this is a welfare talk, but I share this again with you because if you really want to get operations people behind welfare, you can show them this kind of number, and I guarantee you their interest in the problem will go up. Then finally, the sustainability considerations. I think it's pretty straightforward that, again, we've input everything into this bird to get them ready to make into food. All the feed, all the energy, all the labor, everything, including the welfare of the bird. And if that bird dies in the process, our output is virtually nothing. And so from a sustainability standpoint, if you look at a very basic understanding of sustainability, that if we have a system where inputting a lot and taking out little, it's not very resilient and it's not very sustainable. So that makes no sense from this situation either. So with that background, and it was a lot of background on DOAs, but now I want to tell you a little bit about this specific case that I worked on several years ago. So in this graph, this is a monthly DOA percentage, and the complex we were working in at the time was a 1 million bird complex a week. We targeted 4.5 pounds live weight. And the thick blue line going across the middle of the graph is the industry average, and you can see it's about 0.3%, 0.3 to 0.4% month to month. And the purple line is the complex that I was working in. And you can see from June through September, we were beating the industry average, all was good. And then we hit fall and the number began to really skyrocket to where it hit 0.6% in December, started to come down, but really didn't fall below average until July and August. So this was the problem. And what we saw was just from what was the dynamic within the complex. In October, the number started going up and people were kind of scratching their head trying to figure out what was going wrong and what, maybe what we needed to do differently. The number continued to go up, and by November, we got into some pretty serious finger pointing between live operations and plant operations, as were the DOAs occurring in lairage or unloading, or were they during catch and haul? We really weren't sure, but nobody wanted to really take responsibility. And then finally, November, December-ish, upper management in the complex said, I don't care whose fault it is, you're going to fix it. And you can see that from that point, we got serious about it and the numbers began to fall, but still didn't go back below industry average until several months after that. So the first thing we did was establish a cross-functional team within the complex that included live operations. So the live operations manager, broiler manager, and live haul manager. We included plant operations, the plant manager, live receiving supervisors, and maintenance managers. All of these we viewed as people that would have responsibility for this metric and success with this metric. Food safety quality, we involved because they oftentimes manage or monitor these numbers. Accounting, to make sure we were accounting for the DOAs correctly and consistently. And then the complex veterinarian was also involved. And what did we attempt to achieve with this cross-functional corrective action team? First, we wanted to get a common understanding of the team of what the industry trends were relative to DOA performance and whether what we were experiencing was normal or was it an abnormality that we needed to address. We wanted to definitely establish that DOAs are a shared opportunity between live operations and plant operations, and that pointing at the other side was not going to be satisfactory. As a team, we wanted to create a process map so we understood the steps involved from again, house preparation all the way through live receiving and shackling. And we felt like that would help us determine where and why the birds might be dying. And then that would help us identify short and long-term solutions. And then we could put corrective actions in place and measure that response, report out to management. And then the last 2 points I think are pretty important is to establish a shared goal. So oftentimes DOA goal lives with the live haul or the transportation team, but it really can be impacted by broiler management, live haul management, live receiving at the plant. So it really needs to be a goal that's shared across different functions within the complex. And establishing a trigger for future action will prevent that graph that I showed you from getting way out of line really quickly. Looking around, you'll have it in place. So again, the first thing we did was we looked at some industry trends. And so this is AgriStats data. AgriStats is a agricultural reporting service that represents over 95% of the broiler industry in the US. And you can see I've got 3 circles here. And when you look at DOA percentage by month for the U.S. broiler industry, you see that the coldest months and the hottest months are where DOAs peak, which may not be surprising. There's certainly an opportunity every summer and winter to maintain DOAs where they are in the fall and spring. But when you superimpose that and you look at different bird sizes, again, this is AgriStats information, what you see is that bird weight, target bird weight actually influences DOAs as well. And so in the hottest months, bigger birds tend to have higher DOA rates. And in the colder months, smaller birds have higher DOA rates. So this was something that we could take into consideration. Again, this complex was a 4.5 pound bird target weight. So on the smaller side, and we were definitely in that winter time when we were seeing the trend we were seeing. So, maybe there was an indication here that there was some weather that we weren't managing appropriately for. Now, this was complex specific information. We looked at DOA percentage by processing shift, and we saw that there was a difference between first shift and third shift. So those birds that were processed on first shift and caught overnight in the coldest part of the day or night had higher DOA. So again, they were being negatively impacted by the weather and time of day. And you can also see in the coldest months of the year, that number went up even higher than it did during warmer months of the year. Then we looked at catch crew, and we found, again, that there was one catch crew that typically produced higher DOA rates than the other catch crew. So there was an indication that we had some personnel, maybe some training issues that we needed to address. So I mentioned we developed a process map for DOAs, and this is our process map. It starts with house preparation and ends with shackling. And it's intended to show every step of the process. And on top of that, we superimposed what types of things that could influence DOAs at different parts of the process. So that once we identified where the DOAs were occurring, we'd have an idea of what types of things we could look at relative to corrective actions or helping to understand what was going on. We also conducted DOA surveys, and through this, we hope to identify the time and the cause of death of the DOAs. We classified birds by gender and temperature, as well as cause of death, whether it was infectious, trauma, physiologic, environmental, or we just couldn't tell what the cause of death was. And from this, we, again, hope to get enough information that would help us point to where the issues that we're experiencing were. One of the things we also did was we generated this graph that we wanted to understand the decline in body temperature over time in different environmental conditions so that we could determine with DOAs based on their body temperature how long they may have died. And so in other words, if it was 90 degrees out, 50% relative humidity, I'm looking at that purple line on top, and the bird's body temperature, the DOA's body temperature was say 107, that bird may have been dead for 75 minutes. That's how we use that. And from this, we looked at our results, and what we found was that most of the birds, most of the DOA's body temperature was less than 95. Normal body temperature is 103, 104. So they'd been dead for quite a while. Most of the birds that we investigated had no significant lesions. So 57% of them had no significant lesions, which in some ways was good. It told us there wasn't an infectious process going on. There was some trauma, but that wasn't the overlying cause of the problem. This was good information, even though we didn't see anything. Most of the birds were male, 61%. So maybe some big males were dying from heart attacks, and that's what we're picking up in this data. And then this graph just shows the DOA percentage by gender, by sex, by cause. And again, the no significant lesions males represented the biggest portion of those birds. So the results and findings of our trial, what we improve or what we changed to impact the incidences of DOAs were both in live production and processing plant. And as a result of some of the things we were seeing and thought we understood relative to that process flow chart and some of the data, we slowed the catch crews down, especially on the shifts that we had the higher DOAs. We altered the catching method, strengthened our extreme weather transport programs. Again, most of those DOAs were, it was during the winter time. So we had some work to do there. Scheduled maintenance on holding shed fans and misters to some degree to ensure that we were getting maximum airflow over the birds once they arrived at the plant. We established guidelines for when fans and foggers should be used, which we didn't have before. Develop a system of accountability for person operating the unloading system, so that there was a little bit more control and governance over how that job was done. And we worked with accounting to make sure that we were reporting accurate numbers. So through all that, we lowered the DOAs from somewhere between 0.39 to 0.47%. We basically halved it to where it was below the industry average again. And in our case, that CAT team approach worked well. It created that shared work and focus on a shared opportunity. And I would recommend that approach again if I were approaching the same type of problem. And you can see that on the far right, we did get below, as I mentioned, and it was not easy, it was not quick, but it was a lot of attention to detail, and again, that teamwork really helped get everybody engaged to where we could improve those welfare outcomes and this key welfare indicator. So just a couple of other factors to consider, other questions as part of our corrective action plan that we incorporated. We asked, did the process mapping identify specific areas where standard operating procedures needed to be updated? And yes, there were a couple of standard operating procedures that maybe needed to be created, maybe needed to be updated, but there were some gaps there. Were we adequately training all personnel involved in bird handling and transport? There was certainly an opportunity. If you remember back to that, the graph with the catch crews, one crew was higher than the other. So there was definitely some training opportunities, and that's something that there's always opportunity to improve information we provide to our team members, especially in an area like catch crews where there's tends to be a lot of turnover. In some operations, they're contract crews that are delivering the service. So training is a must. And then finally, is all equipment properly and preventatively maintained and repaired in a timely manner when needed? And there's a lot of moving parts in catching and transporting and unloading and shackling birds. Equipment can get worn out pretty quickly if maintenance isn't on top of things. So just to pull it all together, addressing an elevated DOA rate is often a challenge because it spans several departments, and I think I hit on that several times. If you really want to reduce a DOA rate and keep it low, your team needs to be disciplined and approach it in a systematic way, and identify the immediate causes and underlying issues. And you can implement practical solutions that improve welfare, reduce financial losses, and enhance the overall sustainability of your operations if you have attention to detail and good communication, strong accountability and ownership of your teams, and that shared goal that I mentioned. And all of that goes to create a good welfare culture within an organization. So with that, I will say thank you to you all for listening and participating in the interactive portion of the webinar. I wasn't sure how well that would work, but I think it worked okay. And in the remaining time, I'm certainly happy to answer any more questions. Or Rodolfo, I will turn it back to you.
Thank you, Ken. Was very interesting your presentation, and mostly with that interaction part. I didn't expect that, and was very interesting. Actually, it's the first time in all the we're gonna be doing 48 videos this year, webinars. Is quite a few, and was the first time that I saw that a speaker presenter was doing that. So was very nice. I have a question, Ken. I know that you have very international, let's say, experience in different countries with different mentalities. So I don't know if you can name which are the main challenge for the USA for going forward into these kind of metrics and welfare mentality.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge in my mind is building animal welfare culture and having a high level of engagement within organizations. That's been one of the most challenging things I've worked on, and I've enjoyed doing that work. But you need champions within, whether you're talking within any organization. I think my experience is integrated poultry production for the most part. But if you're not able to build that culture and not able to get support from the top people in the company, and I don't mean just yeah, we're behind you kind of support, active support where they're talking about the importance of animal welfare with everybody within the company, to show that they're truly bought in and that they are truly supportive of what you're trying to do as a welfare team. Without that kind of support, it's really hard to build culture. Without the opportunity to engage people and educate people, and I mean, education, training is important and critical, but when you're really trying to build an animal welfare culture within an organization, it goes beyond just training. People have got to understand the 5 domains and why the 5 domains are important, and that what our responsibility is relative to the animals entrusted to our care. They've got to be passionate about it, and in order to build that passion, you've got to have engagement and culture. So I'm not sure if and I would say that is the US and beyond. I think that's everywhere. But that's what I try to figure out, is how to do that best.
Okay, perfect. I think that's very important, and I think that's a common effort that we need to think about, and that's why that's a part of our vision too, that have this community open and to put ideas from different mentalities and from different regions, and to put all these movement together.
Yeah,
okay, so go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say the platform you provide with Poultry School is a great way to help get messages out. And I'll say, I'm not sure who the audience of this webinar is, but we go to welfare meetings, we go to sustainability meetings, and we tend to talk in a vacuum. Everybody in the room maybe agrees with what I have to say, but we've got to talk beyond the people we normally talk to really make what we're doing stronger.
Okay, perfect. So if we don't have any question from the audience, Ken, thank you very much. I think that we will keep working in more material to share with our audience. And I really appreciate your time. And thank you very much for sharing all these years of experience. And let's keep connected, Ken. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rodolfo. Thank you, everybody. Have a good afternoon. Bye now.
Bye-bye. Ciao.